The beginning of all things. God creates the earth in 7 days. First the light, then the universe, then the sea, then the land. Then God makes his greatest creation, man. But then Satan comes to wreak havoc. Then God's own creation, Eve, convinces Adam to eat the forbidden fruit, the first sin.
Okay.
Now on to Job. Job was a holy man. He was very wealthy. He had a wife and plenty of kids, and he honored God. Now, in the throne room, Satan planned to mess with Job to test if Job was really that committed to God. God agrees, and now begins the trials of Job.
Job's kids ended up dying. He was one of them.
Now Job is sacrificed.
Next, Job's crops were all destroyed.
Job passed the test. His wife was one of his only family members to survive. He then had many kids with her, and all his crops were restored, his property was restored, and he had new kids. He was an honorable man to God, and Satan failed. Now next we have Moses. Moses was found from the river Nile just over here in the weeds by Pharaoh's daughter, and was then adopted into the royal family. Little does he know that he is a Jew. The Jews were in slavery against the Egyptians. Moses begs Pharaoh for Pharaoh to let his people go from slavery. Then Moses begins the plagues, the first by turning the Nile River into blood. Now Moses and his people flee Egypt with only a moment to spare. They begin to walk to the promised land where God promised them freedom, that they would own all the land. This is Moses' people walking to the desert on their journey to the promised land. God's people wander for 40 years in the wilderness. They start to build a temple representing the Garden of Eden where the people can worship. Here's a look of one of the Israelites worshiping. Now Joshua is leading his people to conquer Israel, the promised land. Now, the Israelites start conquering the promised land, defeating every city. But they are supposed to not take gold from the first city, Jericho. But, unbeknownst to the Israelites, Achan keeps some gold to himself because he was impatient. So, on the next city, they're not allowed to steal anything. They end up not conquering the full promised land because of this. Now we go on to the judges. There's a downward spiral. Every judge is worse. Everyone is more sinful. The final judge is Samson, a Nazirite, sworn to the Nazirite vow. He's not allowed to touch the dead, he can't drink wine, and he can't cut his hair due to his strength. Eventually, he meets a woman, Delilah, traps him and cuts his hair, removing all strength. All of his strength is gone. Finally, he begs the Lord for one more strength and destroys the Philistines. King David, who is chosen to replace Saul, falls into sin. Now the prophets come, and they begin to prophesy directly from God about what is to come in the New Testament. Mary, you are going to have a son. His name will be Jesus, and he is the Son of God. Mary gives birth to a baby Jesus. The king has been born. Jesus begins to teach on many of his ministries with his disciples. He teaches wisdom, and the people love him. Jesus is crucified. The apostles are crushed. And it looks like all hope is lost. Jesus is crucified. The apostles are crushed and they lay him in a tomb. Jesus rises from the tomb. His apostles worship him, and they can't even believe about this miraculous event. Jesus truly is God. Jesus raises up from Mount Olive back to heaven, and he will only return one more time. Then God appoints one more apostle, Paul. He begins to spread the gospel, going on 3 missionary journeys, going as far as Rome. Paul then continues on to grow the gospel until eventually he is sadly killed. But then John writes Revelation, telling about how God will come back. And Christians await that day, that they will once again meet their Savior.